Loved ones, this video presentation is session 9. If we're meeting face-to-face, it would be 2 July, 2nd of July 2020. And simply as a reminder, your critical thinking exercise is due today. I'm thinking it was the cash for clunkers, but your critical thinking exercise is due today. So, today's a presentation of chapter 6 in the textbook. It's a chapter on strategic management. We talked briefly about strategy when we talked about chapter 5 because strategy is part of the planning function, and that's what managers do. So this chapter is rich in content. There's a ton of stuff here. I have purposefully decided to develop 6 concepts that I think are truly significant. So let me get started. Strategy fundamentally is what is called a fit paradigm. Paradigm is just a framework. It's a way of organizing things. And when I say fit paradigm, strategy looks at how an organization, a firm fits in its environment. So let me put a model on the board of this fit paradigm, and I hope I can bring it to life. All right. I have 4 boxes on the board, and if they're not abundantly clear as you look at it, I'll make them clear. The box on the left is just an external variable called the environment. This box in the middle, I have 2 things stacked, and I have dotted lines as the outer boundaries. This big box is the firm, your firm. And for the purposes of this argument, we're saying that your firm has got 2 pieces. Your firm is made up of its strategy and its structure. And I'll talk about each of them in a moment. And then the box on the right is performance. How does the firm perform? Because of course it has to sell its outputs into the environment. So if you look at the way this model is structured, the environment influences. You see the arrow? It influences your choice of strategy and your choice of structure, and your choice of structure and strategy both influence performance, and there is a bilateral relationship. Strategy influences the choice of structure, and once a firm exists, the structure influences the choice of strategies or constraints. So, what you see on the board is the fit paradigm. This thing in the middle is the firm. Over here is the environment, which influences the firm, and on the right side of the board would be the firm's performance, the things that it outputs. So let me walk through this in terms of how anybody would use strategy in the context of this, what the paradigm means. So I'm going to role play. I'm going to pretend that I just moved here from some other city, and that I am historically a successful businessman. I created a business and sold it for big money or whatever the case may be. So right now, in my little role play, I have no active business interest, but I have a fair amount of accumulated capital, and I'm keenly interested in doing something that I think would contribute to the community. So I'm a new guy in Statesboro, and I look around and I think to myself, oh my goodness, in Statesboro, we have all 3 of the domestics represented. We have dealerships for Fiat Chrysler Automotive. We have dealerships for General Motors. We have dealerships for Ford. We also have 2 of the Japanese car manufacturers represented. We have a Toyota store and a Nissan store. We don't have Subaru or Honda or others, but we have a Toyota store and a Nissan store. And it turns out we have no European franchises represented in the borough. So I think to myself, gosh, I look at the demographics, I look at the population, I look at the proximity. The closest Euro store would be Savannah or Augusta. That's an hour or an hour 15 minimally. Some European dealers are closest, like a Jaguar. I can speak British, yes. I could say Jaguar, Aluminium, and Speciality. Yeah, that's all I got. I got 3 words, that's all the British I can speak. So if you wanted a Jaguar, you gotta go to Hilton Head to get it. That's a 2.5-hour drive one way, or a $550 flat tow. If you buy a Jag, it has to be towed back there for warranty work. I'm not banging on Jaguar, I'm just saying that I think proximity is important. So, I'm a new guy in town, I'm keenly interested in starting an active business, and I sort of look at this dynamic, the car market and Bullitt County and surrounding markets, and I think, gosh, I am going to consider opening an Audi dealership. If I do that, it'll be the only European manufacturer represented here in the borough. Audi limits its vehicles. They only make 2. They make sedans and they make crossovers. Fairly simple market. I'm not going to be competing with Dodge on 4x4s or anything like that. And their cars start in the low 30s, which is no longer expensive. Y'all can buy a Hyundai! I don't know why I can't say that softly. Sensei. You can spend middle 30s on a Hyundai. I talked to a Korean friend and he tells me the pronunciation is Hyundai, but I like my way, it's much more fun. So, you can spend middle 30s or more, you can spend low 40s on a Hyundai minivan thing. So, Audis go from low 30s to Lord knows how much. They climb the sky pretty high. So I think to myself, okay, here are cars that are well regarded in terms of their performance capabilities, in terms of their luxury features. Nobody is serving that market here. The closest one for Audis is somebody up in Augusta, and that isn't forever away, but that's an hour and a half one way, and that might dissuade a lot of people. So I look at the auto industry that's represented in the borough, and I think that might be a good plan. So now I approach Audi North America and say, I'd like to enter into a franchise agreement with you, want to open a dealership in the borough, and we talk, and they learn my business history, and they see that I have sufficient net worth to make it happen. So I, in my little silly role play, I sign a franchise agreement with Audi North America to have a dealership in the borough. And I immediately buy a piece of dirt, break ground, and you know that's going to take 5 or 6 months minimally. So how do I use that 5 or 6 months? I do some low-key promotion coming to the borough. I'm making this up. Spring of 2021 or whatever. Audi of Statesboro. And I may do this on a fairly limited basis just to make people aware that we're coming. They'll see the construction. I can start to hire staff, can't I? I can hire people in all the important support functions like accounting, marketing, HR, all that stuff, because that's got to be in place. I'll start hiring techs because the techs need to be here and they need to be trained on the specific platforms that Audi manufactures. And then of course I'm going to start to build a parts department and a body shop and all the other stuff. So my point is, I told you that little short story and I'll probably continue it. So I am an aspiring entrepreneur. I decide, I look out into the environment and I think, what does this market need? What would it support? And whether I'm right or wrong hasn't yet been proven, has it? But I say to myself, I believe that there is a need for a high quality European car dealership here in the borough. So I looked out in the environment and I made an assessment, didn't I? Then I had struck up this relationship with Audi Corporate, and now I developed a strategy. Once I have the franchise agreement in place, I develop a strategy. You see the arrow that goes down here to structure? I start building the store. Buy the land, build the building, start hiring people, start training, start advertising. So, I did an environmental assessment. I believed that the borough could support an Audi dealership, so that was my strategy. My strategy influenced the choice of structure, and once the store is up and running, we will find out if my strategy positively influences performance. We'll find out if my structure does. What if I have a dealership that's inaccessible? People can't get to it. What if I have a dealership in what you would perceive anywhere in the nation as a high crime part of town? That's going to work against me. What if I decide that our dealership hours are 10:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. 4 days a week? How stupid would that be? So my point is, structure classically is defined as the sum of all the administrative mechanisms of a business. our hours of operation, our compensation policies. How do we compensate our employees? So now, in my example, at some point the store is open and we're selling, so we can measure performance. And if I chose well, if I made a good read on the environment, then my strategy will positively influence performance. What if I made a bad read? My performance will struggle or be suboptimal. Similarly, on the structure side, what if I created an attractive dealership that's accessible, good hours of operation, I've got great people in there, boom! Does it occur to you that that might positively increase performance? And what if I hire slackers or people that are just complete zeros? You know what's going to happen, don't you? So, strategy is what is typically called the fit paradigm. Here's how a firm fits inside its environment. It has to read the environment for cues. It also has to go to the environment for resources. Then somebody develops a strategy, builds a structure, now you have a firm, and those decisions on strategy and structure influence performance either positively or negatively. That's the fit paradigm. And again, I thought it was well to bring that in here. So now, I want to jump to strategic decision making. This is one of those 5 or 6 big concepts I want to talk about. It will take me just a moment to get a model on the board. So, this is a continuum. It is simply a line that has discrete anchor points. It starts there, and it ends here. Now, in the text, this strategic decision-making model is presented with 5 steps, and I think that's silly. I mean, that's kind of like saying, when I walk in the room, I turn on the lights. Some things don't need to be introduced or developed. So, here's how strategic decision-making goes. There are 3 steps. This first step is analysis. I'm going to talk through each one of these. The second step is formulation. The last step is implementation. So, let's go to T1. I'm going to do this in a way that I think is pretty real in terms of your early career. Here's a promise that I can make to you, and there will be exceptions to this, but virtually all of you, if you leave here, you join an organization, it's likely your early career stuff will be in some sort of a managerial role. You might be a team lead with direct interaction, you might be a frontline manager, I don't know, but that is the path many of you will take. So, and this will be true if you're a logistician or accountant, it doesn't matter what your discipline is. So, at T1, your big boss comes to you and says something like this: Norton, we're struggling, and then he or she will define a problem. Sales in North Carolina are 16% of what we thought they'd be. Or we're getting a lot of pushback from customers about this product. Or why aren't we fill in the blanks? What will happen at T1 is someone to whom you are accountable in the organization will identify a problem. They'll put a task in front of you. They may say that sales are disappointing or lots of complaints or lots of after the sales service, but at T1, your big boss is going to identify some sort of a problem. Now, is it possible that she or he misidentifies the problem? Of course it is. But that's where you take over. Now, this is going to happen in your first 6 months on the job, I promise you. And it'll happen on a regular basis. So, you'll be part of a team. You may be the team lead, you may be a member, but it doesn't matter. You'll be part of a team, and the first thing y'all are going to do after T1 is you're going to do this thing called analysis. What you're going to do is get your little happy feet out there in the environment and find out what's going on. You'll gather data. You'll get customer perceptions. You'll look at what competitors are doing. You'll look at macro forces over which you have no control, like interest rates or loan availability or whatever it is that impacts your operations in that segment, whether it's a demographic, whether it's a geographic piece, whether it's a particular product line. But the point is, your big boss is going to give you a challenge. She or he is going to put a task in front of you and say, go find out the answer to, boom, whatever the question is. So you get out here and you gather data. And your data have to be rich. They have to be primary data. You have to interact with people and say, you've reported several failures with this product. What has happened? Please share that with us. We want to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I promise you, the tap will be opened. They'll give you a pretty clear read for what's going on and why they're unhappy. So, whatever it may be, whatever the specific tasks may be, the first part of strategic decision making is y'all do an analysis. You get out in the environment and you gather data. Now, what that may do is that may refine or even redefine the question. You may discover in the data gathering process that your big boss was really unclear about what the specific challenge, task, opportunity was. So, you gather data, and then you do analytics. You literally manipulate the data, find out what the data mean, and then the crazy important part is interpretation. We have a lot of raw data. We talk to these customers, we look at competitors, we talk to bankers, whatever. We have a lot of raw data. We have to analyze those data, and we get some results. What do the data mean? So probably, every part of this process is important, but probably the piece that has primacy is how do you interpret the data? What do you think these data mean? What are they telling us? So you, at the end of this T1 timeline, somewhere in here, you're going to report to your big boss. You're going to say, big boss, here's what we found. Indeed, you were right about the nature of the problem, and we think that these things contribute to it, and we'd even like to make a set of recommendations, specific things that we think might be solutions. So, at the end of this process of analysis, you're going to report out what you found, what you conclude, and likely what you recommend, what you think the right course of action is. So, at T2, somebody relatively high in the organization is going to say, got it, here's what we need to do. We need to have much higher quality metrics in our manufacturing, we need to ramp up customer service, need to improve our IT, I don't know. Because of course I'm talking in the abstract. But at T2, somebody higher than you makes a decision on this new course of action. Here's the direction we're going to go to respond to what this team found in the analysis phase. So, at T2, you start the process of formulation. Big bosses say, here's the new path, and then it has to come down to your unit. Whatever that may mean. So, in T2, you formulate a revised, a new plan of action. Now, I can never predict the future. I would expect that this analysis phase would last minimally 6 or 8 months. I don't think it's possible to get out there, gather primary data, do the analysis and interpretation, and make a recommendation. This is not something you do tapping on a keyboard. This is when you go interact with people. What are your experiences, good, bad, or ugly? And then you have to get not just one or two, but lots. You have to get a broad perspective and do something with it. So I would expect that the analysis phase of the strategic decision making takes 6 or 8 weeks minimally. Now, once somebody high up in the organization makes a decision on the new plan, to develop your own plans at every level might only take a couple of weeks. So formulation tends to be compressed in time. To develop a plan, once you have a reasonable foundation, is not a time-consuming thing. Yes, you're going to debate and discuss and find out about resources and consider alternatives, but to actually formulate a plan is not a time-intensive task. So, at T2, you start this process of formulation, and at T3, it's over. Now, the last stage of strategic decision making is implementation. I think the authors use the word execute. I'm okay with that. They are perfectly synonymous, aren't they? So, the reason I choose implementation, first of all, it's fairly common in the strategic management literature that we would use analysis, formulation, implementation. In fact, it's often called the AFI model, analysis, formulation, implementation. However, my point is, we start implementation, we implement the plan that we develop back here. Now, it is inarguable that when you get out here to T4, what you're probably looking at is some kind of feedback. Okay, so now we have new data that permits us maybe to do a new analysis, maybe to develop a new plan, maybe to do something different. But I'm not suggesting that business ends. I'm just saying that, in fact, we could probably take the end off of that, except this model is offered as a continuum. Here's the thing that I think is so extraordinarily challenging about implementation. I want to erase the thing that says strategic decision making just to give me some board space. There is an enormous difference between the first two phases and the third phase. Analysis and formulation are both cognitive tasks. That's what thinking women and thinking men do. They gather data, analyze the data, interpret the data, develop a plan. Those are cognitive tasks. You and I can do that well in this room. However, the challenge is when we get to T3, we have to implement, we're no longer thinking men and women, it's now action. We have to do stuff, and we have absolutely no control over anything once we do stuff. What if we launch a new product, and we did a poor job in design, we got crappy materials or something like that, and it's a failure? What if it's a good product, and our competitors look at it and say, oh my gosh, let's whip them. Let's come to the market with something that's better. Same features, less money, or same money, more features, or whatever they would do. So we control no one. We don't control our customers' behavior. We don't control our competitors' behavior. We don't control emerging tech. We don't control government intervention. When we get to this phase of implementation, all we can do is act out the plan that we developed. Because we're now in the environment taking a series of actions, and we have no control over other people's responses. So, the first two parts of strategic decision making, analysis and formulation, are relatively easy. They're relatively straightforward because those are cognitive tasks. You and I are thinking through something. And it's easy to plan something. It's not nearly as easy to carry it out. Think about a football player. My assignment may be a downfield block or to throw a pass to a wide receiver. Or is it wide retriever? I always get that mixed up. I may have a plan, but I have no control over the defensive, the safeties, the quarterbacks, or anybody else out there. I have no control over what the linemen are doing. I know what they hope to do, but they're not necessarily going to achieve it. What if I'm across the line from Davian Clowney? I would kick his butt, wouldn't I? Come on. So, you are looking at the strategic decision-making model. And again, I think it's on 193 in the text if my notes are right. And all I really wanted to do was simplify it and bring it to life. Because you are going to be doing that, I promise you. Within 4, 5, 6 months of you getting a job somewhere. I promise you. Even if you're not the lead dog on the team, you are going to be on a team that has to struggle with, here's an opportunity, let's capitalize on it, or here's a threat, let's neutralize it. You're going to be doing that, I promise you. That's what you are being educated to do. Oh dear. I want to talk to you now about what the text talks about as VRIO, but I'm going to bring it to life in a different way, so let me get some board space. I see something on the desk that I want to share with you. You may remember that a few days ago in the summer session of ours, I told you that since the building was empty, that there was an active shooter drill where 4 local agencies worked collaboratively to train, and they cleared the building, and there was some Acapulco gold up on the 3rd floor in an econ office. Gee, imagine that. But I don't know if I shared this with you. I participated. We often invite faculty and staff to participate in these drills. And all of us law enforcement officers and non-Leos, all of us had to use training pistols. This is a rubber pistol. In fact, we lovingly call this thing a rubber ducky. It is the correct size and shape of a contemporary handgun. But we all used rubber duckies in this active shooter drill. So I just, and what it made me think of, seeing the pistol over here and thinking about this active shooter drill, is I wanted to share with you the first rule of a gunfight. This is so simple. The first rule of a gunfight is have a gun. So now let me jump back to this thing about VRIO. Actually, what I want to talk to you about is an important theoretical framework, and it's called the resource-based view. This was developed by a really, really brilliant guy named Jay Barney. He probably published this first in 1990, 1991, so it's about 30 years old. And Barney gave us this theory called the resource-based view, and he was at Ohio State at the time. Go Buckeyes. How'd you name your teams after a nut that's toxic? I don't know why people do a lot of stuff. So Barney developed this theory, the resource-based view, and what the theory is meant to do is it was meant to predict firm success at the firm level. He wasn't studying industries like economists would or people like that. He's a strategist, and he was studying firm performance. And he developed this powerful theoretical framework, and by the early middle 90s, like 94 to 96, there were a lot of empirical studies already rolling out that had significant positive support. And again, in the 30 years since he first published this, it's really become sort of the most foundational theory in the entire domain of strategy. So this is big stuff. In the textbook, they just talk about VRIO, but that's just part of Barney's theory. So let me put the resource-based view on the board, and I'll show you how this VRIO thing, what role it has in it. So I'm going to put a bunch of blocks on the board. I'm just going to use notations, and I'll make sure that all of you understand. All right. So, this theory essentially has 5 variables in it. The HR simply means heterogeneous resources. I'll come back and talk about each of these boxes in a moment. HR means heterogeneous resources. Here is the VRIO thing, and what it is it's a moderating strategy. DCs means distinctive competencies, those things that a firm does uncommonly well, better than its competitors. SCA is the pseudo-acronym for Sustainable Competitive Advantage. That's what you would always want your firm to achieve. And then this last box is strategy. So here's the relationship. Here's how this resource-based view theory predicts a firm's profitability. Barney's argument, and he drew from the work of other people, Edith Penrose and other bright scholars, everybody recognizes that firms are bundles of heterogeneous resources. I don't care who you are, your resource set is different. If you looked at 4 Chevrolet dealerships in Atlanta, do they all sell Chevrolets? Indeed they do. Do they have different staffs, different customer bases? Are they located on different arteries, thoroughfares, whatever the case may be? Do they spend different money on advertising? For example, do some have a big internet presence? Others are buying full-page ads in the Atlanta Communist Journal, whatever that paper is. I forgot its actual name. So, no matter how similar firms look, every firm is differentially endowed. That's where we start. All firms are bundles of heterogeneous resources. We have different resource endowments than other firms. Same city, same business. Different resource endowments. Now, Barney's argument, he put this entire thing together, but one of the major contributions that he made is this framework, VRIO, that the authors talk about, but they talk about this in isolation, and that is unfortunate, but I'll cure that deficiency. This argument says that if a resource, if any intangible resource is at the same time valuable, rare, inimitable, and the organization is essentially designed to exploit it. If those 4 attributes exist, then that resource, whatever it is, becomes a distinctive competency. It is something that your firm does uncommonly well, much better than most others in the industry. And if you take these competencies and you adopt a strategy, see the strategy influences this relationship? If you have these competencies and you adopt a strategy that properly takes them to market, your firm will enjoy sustainable competitive advantage. So I want to talk about each one of these things. What I'm not going to talk about, with one exception, is this heterogeneous resource thing. Barney made a declaration when he developed this theory 30 years ago, and it was brilliant, as was all of his work. Barney's observation was, we're only going to look at intangible resources. Anything that's tangible has a value in the factor market. If I go buy a truck or a computer system or a building, all those things can be bought and sold. Everybody in my industry can obtain the same things. So what you have to have are resources that are essentially, in fact, the definition of a distinctive competency. These resources are embedded in people. These are knowledge-based resources. Critical that you have that understanding. When we talk about heterogeneous resources, we're talking about knowledge-based resources. Now, when you get to the definition of a distinctive competency, you just take that foundation and you build on it. The definition of a distinctive competency would be skill sets or organizational routines that are the basis for sustainable competitive advantage. Loved ones, skill sets reside in you. Every one of you has a bundle of skills. You may do a number of things much better than I. It's possible I might do something better than you. But skill sets reside in individuals. Organizational routines are how we work together. I'm working on a paper with David Sikora in my department. So we're working collegially and collaboratively, and we really hope that we'll push this thing across the finish line. So how do we work in groups? How do we work in groups? So start with the notion that when we say heterogeneous resources, we are only talking about knowledge-based resources, not physical stuff, because physical stuff is mobile. It can move across companies in any industry, which means that there's no basis for an advantage. So the theory starts by recognizing that firms are bundles of different resource endowments. And Barney's argument was, if any one of these knowledge-based resources can create value, if it's rare, if it cannot be imitated, and we are organized to take advantage of it. If those 4 attributes exist, this knowledge-based resource becomes a distinctive competency. Skill sets or organizational routines that are the basis for sustainable competitive advantage. So we now have these competencies. If we develop a strategy that takes them to market, boom, we will achieve sustainable competitive advantage. We will outperform others in our industry on a long-term basis. Now, sustainable has to be industry specific, doesn't it? Look at consumer electronics. What do you think the product life cycle is? A year, maybe? If you were to look at something like, if you were to look at distilled beverages, spirits like bourbon or other health foods like that, doesn't it take 7, 8, 10 years to make that stuff? So again, I get it that the product cycles are very different across industries. Some of them are incredibly short, some of them are quite long. But sustainable competitive advantage says that by definition that you outperform others in your industry on a long-term basis. And that has to be relative to the industry in which you compete. So that is the resource-based view. It is an incredibly powerful theory. It's powerful because it has excellent predictive value. If you overlay that theory over any firm, you can see why some firms outperform others and why some firms don't. Now, when Barney developed this theory, his intention was it would just be a theoretical framework that predict firm success. What we've discovered since then is it's a fabulous way to do an intra-organizational assessment, and it's also equally as good to identify merger or acquisition partners. Think about this, if you will. Let's assume we do some sort of an inventory of our firm, and we determine the distinctive competencies that we possess, and we know those that we must have to succeed in our industry. What if we come up short? What that means is that to use this as an intra-organizational assessment, we're essentially looking at our strengths and our weaknesses. So if you do an inventory of these distinctive competencies and you discover that you don't possess one that you think you need, clearly the message is threefold. First, you can invest in yourselves. You can train people, you can invest in them, whatever the case may be. The second is you can bring in, you can associate in new people who possess those skill sets. Or alternatively, you can say, you know, it'll take us way too many years to do that. Let's just go buy somebody. Let's acquire another firm that has those competencies. So, although Barney intended this theoretical framework to be a theory that predicted firm success, we found it has other magnificent uses in an organizational context. So again, I don't criticize the authors of the textbook as much as I point out that all they talk about is VRIO, and that is simply a piece of this bigger puzzle called the resource-based view, which argues that knowledge-based resources are the key to firm success, and knowledge-based resources reside in people, either individually or in organizational routines. Big stuff. The authors now talk a bit about diversification. And clearly that represents a framework inside the strategy. I want to, my pass through this is going to be relatively quick, and that's just meant to be time management. I know that our classes are an hour 50 if we were meeting face to face, and in some cases I would burn every one of those minutes. You have the luxury in this platform to pause the video and come back. But when I talk about diversification, I'm on 205 in the text, and I want to highlight three concepts inside of this big topic of diversification. The first is, if a company, and there are many of them, if a company is a single product company, it's not diversified. I would say to you that Ford Motor Company is a single product company. The only thing it does is manufacture and distribute motor vehicles. It sells cars in a variety of forms. It sells, luxury cars with the Lincolns. It sells Mustangs, which are magnificent performance cars. It sells crossovers, sport utilities, trucks. But Ford builds and distributes vehicles, motorized vehicles that roll on rubber pneumatic tires. So Ford's a single product company, isn't it? It just makes cars and trucks. And there are plenty of other single product companies in so many other industries. But Ford just seemed like a good example. Now, if a company diversifies, it does something outside of its core business. What if Ford bought a yogurt chain? I can't believe it's not yogurt, or whatever those, maybe that's I can't believe it's not butter. You see my point. What if Ford bought Baskin Robbins or Brewster's or something like that? Is there any similarity between manufacturing motor vehicles and selling ice cream? I think not. So clearly, that's an example of diversification, and in my example, that would be unrelated. There's nothing shared. Typically, when firms engage in unrelated diversification, their objective is financial. Let me role play. Let me pretend that I'm on the board of the Ford Motor Company, and we're successful selling vehicles, and that has been true for decades. But we know that vehicles have this boom and bust sort of cyclical behavior, because if interest rates go up, sales go down. People either can't qualify for loans or they're unwilling to pay high rates of interest to buy a new car or truck. So Ford, anybody in the global auto industry, anywhere in the world, is sensitive to fluctuations in interest rates. So let's pretend I'm on the board of Ford, we've got some cash that we can invest, and we talk about diversification. We say, gee, maybe we should no longer be a single product company. So I'm the board guy, and I say to my fellow members on the board, I think we should buy a grocery store chain, like Albertsons or K. Roger or something. Y'all look at the sign, it's K. Roger. We should buy a grocery store chain because there's no seasonality, there's no sensitivity to interest rates. We have to buy diapers, sometimes for short kids, sometimes for adult faculty members. We have to buy diapers and food and cleaning products, and of course in my case a lot of beauty stuff. Oh yeah, all kinds of makeup and things like that. So a grocery store chain does not have either the cyclical nature of global autos, nor does it have any sensitivity to interest rates. That would also describe companies in the waste management business. Their revenues and their profitability is just a flat line. So I would say, let's take a few $100 million, if we have that to spend, and buy a company whose operating cycle is not the same as ours. They're not subject to interest rates, they have no seasonality. When I say seasonality, in domestics, I know there's all sorts of variation, but in the domestic auto industry, the date that we classically measure for the new car year is 1 October. On the 1st of October, all the new cars for domestic manufacturers are supposed to be rolled out and presented. That's when the new model year starts. Now, the imports don't observe that. And there are many, many situations where companies will purposefully introduce a new model before a model year starts. They want to create buzz or build sales or do a lot of things like that. But historically, 1 October every year in the United States is the day that we start a new year, a new measurable year for the American auto industry. So all I'm saying to you is unrelated diversification is usually carried out because the company wants to accomplish some financial objective, some smoothing of income, or perhaps it sees a segment that's got greater growth potential than it does. I don't know, but most unrelated diversification is engaged in because there's an observable financial benefit. Now, that's unrelated diversification. Related diversification is precisely what you would expect. Something in this company that we're about to acquire is comparable, is similar to what we do. There will be some shared characteristics. We haven't talked about this, but an aerospace engineer 50, 60 years ago named Howard Head started the Head Ski Company. And he was knowledgeable about all these exotic materials and he understood manufacturing, and he was an avid recreational skier. So he brought to the market an altogether new steel. It had a metal insert and no other, all skis were wooden at the time, much like baseball bats were wooden at the time. So Head brought to the market a very, very innovative ski. It was really successful, and he gave a lifetime guarantee. So the point that I'm moving towards is at some point, Head reached that capping out. There are just so many people that ski in this country, and skiing is both seasonally bounded, it's bounded in time, and it's spatially bounded. You can argue with me, and I will invite the debate, but the only places that ski for 4 or 5 months a year are either northern New England or the Rockies. They're skiing in other places, but the season's only 4 or 5 months long even in those places. So skiing is bounded in time and in space. So at some point, Head capped out. He couldn't sell any more skis because everybody that wanted one had one. So he said to himself, could I engage in some related diversification? And what he did is just stunning in its simplicity and in its impact. Because Head gave a lifelong warranty to all of his ski customers, everybody at the bottom submitted a warranty card. Of course you would. If it breaks, it's on him. So he had this database of millions of warranty cards with people that had bought his skis and were happy with them. So he had his marketing department send out a survey. And the survey said, when y'all are not skiing, he probably didn't say y'all, I don't know. When y'all are not skiing, what recreational activities do you engage in? And what he found, and this doesn't surprise me, what he found is that disproportionately skiers are tennis players. Well, heck yes. Of course they are. It's counter-seasonal. We ski in the winter, and we play tennis in the spring and the summer. Okay. I paid attention in math class. Actually, I didn't. I was staring at this really cute girl named Sandy. Oh dear, I had a lot of steamy thoughts about that young lady. Please forgive me. So, what Head did with this new information, the fact that he's got all these happy customers, these skiers who bought his skis and are well pleased with them, and he realized that they also like tennis as a counter-seasonal sport, is he created a new company, the Prince Tennis Racket Company. And both of those firms, though they were created 60 years ago, are still vibrant and active today. I thoroughly enjoy the Winter Olympics. In fact, I was an alternate on the biathlon team. No, I wasn't. But I would love to ski and shoot. and represent this magnificent country of ours. So I'm watching the Olympics, the 2018 Olympics in Pyeongchang, North Korea. Oh dear, we should nuke them. Forgive me. And there were head skis there. Members of the U.S. national ski team were skiing on head skis. And I have friends who are avid tennis players and very competent, and they tell me that Prince rackets are fabulous. So my point is, what Howard Head did is he engaged in something called related diversification. He created a new company which served a different recreational market, but they shared, these two companies, Head Ski and Prince Racket, they shared the same customer base. So related diversification says that there's some shared characteristic. The same customer base, the same technology, the same distribution channels, whatever the case may be. So if you look at diversification, it's almost as discrete as I've suggested. You have companies that are single product companies, and there are quite a few of them. John Deere makes ag equipment. They make a little bit of construction equipment, but it's really trivial relative to what they do in ag equipment. Excuse me. So there are a lot of single product companies, but if you engage in two or more businesses, you've diversified. And all diversification comes in one of those two flavors. It's either related, there's some shared characteristic, or there's no relationship whatsoever to what the firms do. And typically, the objective is to accomplish some financial result. I'm wearing myself out. This chapter's got too much stuff in it. Page 206. Porter's 5 forces. I need board space. Please be patient with me. All right. What I have on the board is a model of Porter's 5 forces. Here's the backstory. The man who created this, Michael Porter, began his career as an economist and quickly became a strategic management guy. He fundamentally shifted from studying industry structure to studying how firms try to outperform others in their industry. So Porter was an economist turned strategist. Brilliant guy, probably a great teacher, but a magnificent scholar, and wrote a lot of crazy good books about competitive advantage and that sort of thing. So Porter created, since he'd come from a background of economics, but he'd become a strategist, Porter created this framework, Porter's 5 forces. And what this is it's an analytical framework. You can overlay it on any firm in any industry and have a very clear sense for what the firm's competitive position is. So I'm going to go through the pieces of this framework and how it operates. But I want you to understand, again, the backstory was important. Michael Porter is responsible for this. It's been active since maybe 1980 or something like that. And it is as powerful today as it was 40 years ago. Good stuff. I promise you this is a tool that you should capture, because if you have half a brain, you will use it. So this little dot in the middle is the firm. I've modeled this as if it is a pentastar. From the hub, there are 5 spokes that go out. And what that suggests is that theoretically, none of these forces is more important than the other. As a practical statement, you may find yourself in an industry where 1 or 2 of these forces are significantly, have much greater impact. But theoretically, they should all start as equal. So here's the firm. The firm is this dot in the middle. And the firm is influenced by these 5 forces: barriers to entry, buyers, rivals, your direct competitors, substitutes, and suppliers. Porter's argument is that every firm in every industry in the nation faces the same 5 structural attributes. And I want to talk about them now. And I'm just going to take them from the top and I'll work around. So barriers to entry essentially answers a question: how difficult is it for somebody as a new entrant to come into our industry? There are some industries that have incredibly high barriers. Think about nuclear power generation. First of all, you have to have a license from the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Then it takes about 10 years and several $billions to build one before it can come online. Think about a global car company. To build one factory that is EPA compliant takes about $1.5 or $2 billion. It takes about 2 or 3 years to develop a single product. And to develop a new product in the auto industry is about a $3 or $4 billion venture. So from the time you say go until you can sell your first car is 3 or 4 years, and minimally you've invested $5 billion. And in my example, you don't have a dealer network. Oh dear. So some industries have incredibly high barriers to entry. Others, the barriers you and I could jump over on a dead run. What if, for example, I wanted to open a hair salon here in the borough? Well, the first thing I have to do is get credentialed to do that. So I want to go down to Mgmt Tech, and they have a 1-year program. I think it's about maybe 1,500 contact hours. And after this year, I'm equipped. I now have a license as a cosmetologist or whatever the license is called. So I have the credential. So now, once I have this credential in place after my 1 academic year of training, I go out and let's say I rent a space in a shopping center. I rent an 1,800 or 2,000 square foot space, and rent is relatively cheap, and it costs me $15,000 or $20,000 to build it out. I've got to put in a reception area, shampoo stations, stations for the stylist to work. Then I have a big grand opening party, and I have a radio station come do it remote, and I serve Brie and Chablis, or is it Chapless? Pinky's out. I always get those two things confused. But if you work through that with me, you'll see that in 6 or 8 weeks for $20,000 or $25,000, I can be open and I can be peeling heads. Okay, so for me to open a hair salon is a fraction in terms of time and money for me to open a new car company or a lot of other things. So some industries have very high barriers to entry, and some industries have very low. Buyers. Actually, I want to do buyers and suppliers almost simultaneously, because although they are diametrically opposed, buyers buy your output, suppliers provide you inputs. Yes? Aren't they crazy different? Because they're opposites. But as you consider buyers and suppliers in your industry, you have to consider all of them, and you consider their dynamics, the way they interact with you. What you're trying to find out, what you're trying to answer is, can either of these groups, buyers or suppliers, exert dominance over me? Can they require me to do something? I have a friend who has a sporting goods store, and he tells me that if he wants to buy a particular line of firearms, he has to commit to a first-time purchase of $80,000, and he has to take a lot of stuff that these companies make that are not firearms. He has to take pocket knives and clothing and stuff like that. So does he want to do that? What if, let's pretend that I'm a company here in the borough, and I've got 40 very bright computer programmers and computer science folks on my staff. 40 people who are incredibly bright, and the only thing that we do, we have one mission. We write code that permits companies to launch and recover space vehicles. That's all we do. So in the entire universe, we have 3 people who can buy our stuff. NASA, the federal agency, and we could have Elon Musk's SpaceX maybe as a customer, and Jeff Bezos has Blue Virgin, I guess that's his space company. So my point is that we only have 3 customers over here. Are they going to have relatively high standards? Heck yes. What if alternatively we have a vehicle service place here in the borough, we sell tires? Everybody with a vehicle needs tires, agreed? So we have potentially tens of thousands of customers right here in Statesboro. So can buyers do anything that would represent them dominating our decisions? Similarly, think about suppliers. What if I have a restaurant here in town, And I want to sell it, let's say it's a nice, a fast casual, not a Panera, but something that's classy. So I have an upscale casual restaurant here in town, and I use a lot of fresh produce. And a vendor comes to me and says, okay, Norton, I'm gonna sell you those tomatoes, they're $900 a bushel. My kind response will be to tell that person to go jump off the planet. I don't have to pay $900 a bushel for tomatoes, because there are probably 1,000 other vendors that'll sell me tomatoes for $2 or $3 a bushel. So in my restaurant example, the suppliers can't exert any dominance over the way I do business. But my wife and I did a honeymoon safari when we were first married. It was after our marriage, we did it in 1992. But we did a safari in 3 countries, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and the Republic of South Africa. And it was a life experience. I'm as excited today as I was when we did it. But I'm sharing that with you because we spent about 8 or 10 days in Zimbabwe at 2 different camps. And I learned then, didn't know this before, that Zimbabwe, the African nation in sub-Saharan Africa, has as natural resource deposits about 75% of the world's chromium. So if you're in a business that uses chrome for anything, you better have a relationship with one of those suppliers, because 3/4 of the world's chromium ore comes from one country. So is that a situation where a supplier could dominate? It is. So the question is, or rather what I want you to understand is, they are radically different, buyers and suppliers. At the end of the day, you have to learn about the dynamics and attributes of all of them. What you're trying to discern is if either groups can exert any dominance over how you make decisions. Now, rivals. These are companies that are your direct competitors. If, for example, I'm a middle manager for UPS, I would say to you that in the United States, my direct competitors are only FedEx and the US Postal Service, because both of those organizations deliver packages quickly. When I say quickly, next day, 2 day, whatever the case may be. It's a matter of what we want to pay for the service as customers. So, and in other parts of the world, like you go to Europe, DHL has a significant presence in Europe, and there are others as well. So this thing about rivals, who are your rivals? Are you in a fragmented industry where nobody dominates? Are you in a consolidated industry where there are 2 or 3 major players and everything they do ripples down throughout the industry? So who are your rivals and how do they behave? And then the last thing would be substitutes. Is there any technologically equivalent substitute to what you do? Do people have choices? Quick example, in fact, I'll stick with the UPS thing for a moment. I gave myself what I hope is a good example. So UPS is primarily in the business of delivering packages, and they tend to do it on a priority basis. And UPS has an air wing, and then they have a significant ground delivery component. So UPS does priority delivery of packages. That is its primary business. So what if I went to the UPS store in wherever that place is? There's a shopping center on Northside Drive. UPS is there, Chick-fil-A, Tractor Supply. So I go to the UPS store and I say, I have a document, and I need to get this document to a real estate office in San Diego, and it's got to be there tomorrow before noon. So the UPS person smiles and says, that would be $450. And I say, no, I'm not going to do that. How else could I get these documents to that real estate office in San Diego? Could I fax them? Every business that I know of still has facsimile transmission. Could I scan them and send them as an email attachment? I could, because I have technologically equivalent substitutes. Not a direct competitor, not one of the rivals, but a technologically equivalent substitute. So here's Porter's argument. Every industry has the same 5 structural attributes. Doesn't matter if we're talking about chemicals, paint, food service, every industry has these same structural attributes. If you're the firm here, if you're an incumbent, you want to make an assessment of those things and see what, if anything, represents a threat. Well, what if you're an aspiring firm and you want to be an entrant? Okay, you look at the same 5 features and you think, gosh, there's the potential that I can launch a firm in that industry and be successful. Or not. I would not launch a a business that's a domestic airline. It's unionized, it's heavily regulated, it's non-differentiable. People just buy based on frequent flyer miles or cost between city pairs. It's hyper competitive. You have to invest billions of dollars in assets. One plane costs about 120 million bucks. So my point is, I would not enter the domestic airline industry because the structural attributes they don't favor new entrant. So my point is that this analytic framework is magnificent. You study these 5 structural attributes, you gather data on each of them, and then you discern what you think that means, and you may discover whether you're an incumbent or whether you wish to be a new entrant. You look at these forces and see which ones, if any, present a competitive threat. And once you know what the environment is like, the industry environment, it's pretty easy to develop a strategy that responds to that, that would give you a competitive advantage. One more big one. Business level strategies. Again, I need word space. These are CBD infused cough drops. Yes, my students call me Dr. Vibe. No, they don't. These are just Halls. Just Halls cough drops. All right, this is the big finish. This is the last of those 5 or 6 major concepts that I told you I was going to address today. So, this topic, you and I, we're on 207, that's where it starts, this discussion of business level strategies. It frustrates me that the authors don't really understand this, and I'll build that argument in just a moment, but it turns out they say there are 4, there are 2. And only 2. 2 business level strategies. Here's the first one. I'm going to use a pseudo acronym, OCL, Overall Cost Leadership. To be the overall cost leader in any industry means that you key on efficiency, on operational efficiency, and you push your costs to the lowest level you can and still deliver quality products or service. Southwest Airlines has done that for 50 years. Southwest has consistently been a low-cost provider. I have an example. These data are probably 4 or 5 years old, but they tell a powerful story. So, in the airline industry, one of the metrics that the industry studies, the people who are in that industry of commercial aviation, they study costs per passenger mile. That's a pretty big deal. What does it cost us to fly 1 passenger 1 mile? So, a few years ago, and not long, 4 or 5 years ago, here's the industry average. The mean for the industry was about 11 cents per passenger mile, cost per passenger mile. That same year, because I was studying it, Southwest's cost per passenger mile, 5.8 cents. Now, unless I embarrass myself, if that were 5.5 cents per passenger mile, it'd be half of the industry average. So think about the competitive advantage Southwest has as the overall cost leader. If I'm Southwest Airlines, and I'm making this up, and a ticket from Boston to Miami costs $450, and American Airlines flies the same city pairs. They fly Boston to Miami, in my example, and they sell the ticket for the same amount of money. We both generate the same revenue, but who has higher costs? My competitor does. I'm the lowest in the industry. So although I generate the same revenue, my net profit per passenger mile is twice as much. How cool is that? So all I'm saying to you is cost leadership says that in any industry, there's only one firm that is the cost leader. But we, in any industry, can never compromise quality of service or product. If we do, people will migrate from us to firms that provide quality. So cost leadership just says that you focus on operational efficiency. You maximize resources. You do things as well as you possibly can. And it pays dividends. However, that's only one of 2 strategies. The other strategy that is a business level strategy, it's we're in some business and how do we compete, is a strategy called differentiation. Differentiation has two pieces to the definition. One, among competing products, people choose yours. Now, people choose you. They choose your product from among competing products or services because you offer some features, some bundle of attributes that they value. And then the second part of the definition is, not only do they pick your stuff, they also pay a premium. Now, I'm going to give you what I hope is a good example. I have, for 30 years or so, put Michelin tires on all of our trucks and streetcars. Because Michelin's, they do a lot of good things, but they do two things uncommonly well. And this is both, it's embedded in their design and it's embedded in their manufacturing processes. They purposefully build tires, all of them, 100% of them, to handle well in wet weather. Well, all over the nation, we drive in rain, don't we? I like that. I like the fact that they handle well in the wet. The other thing that's true is my experience has been I get extreme service life. I had 2 sets of Michelin's light truck radials on an F350, a 1-ton Ford, and each of them went for 120,000 miles before I had to replace them. So when I buy Michelin's, I choose them from all the competing tire manufacturers, and I cheerfully pay a premium because they match up with my value proposition. So for you, in any business, to have a strategy that differentiates your company from others, you have to build in features, whatever those features are, that make people choose your products or services over others, and they have to be willing to pay a premium for it. If they don't value it, you're basically screwing yourself. I know there's a nicer verb in there somewhere. But those are the two pieces of the definition of differentiation. Among competing products, customers choose yours because you give them some bundle of features that they value, and they're willing to pay a premium. So, and again, my experience with Michelin tires is a sort of a classic manifestation of that. Now, I'm going to put something on the board because this will show you why I challenge what the authors have in the textbook. Well, I want to make one more comment about differentiation before I do that. It's worth you hearing because this is big stuff. So differentiation has 2 different types. We have real differentiation, and then we have perceived differentiation. Real differentiation means that you, the company, incur significant cost to build in these features that people value. Here's a great example, I hope. Rolex watches. I checked not long ago because I wore a Rolex daily for 22 years, and I sold them when I went to grad school because I needed money a lot more than I needed a nice watch. But I like Rolexes, and I looked a few years ago, and if memory serves correctly, the least expensive Rolex that I could buy new was $10,000. I was unwilling to do that. So, but the point is that people pay that money for Rolexes because they're magnificent. Most of the cases are stainless steel. The cases, the bracelets, are stainless steel. They are certified Swiss chronometers. They're accurate to like 1/10 of a second every 600 years. They will function at incredible depths. I'm wearing an Omega Seamaster, and this watch will go to 300 meters. That's about 1,000 feet. Submarines blow up at that point. No, they don't. But my point is, and the Rolex watches are very, very handsome pieces of jewelry, and they last forever. Who wouldn't pay big money for something that has all of those features? So Rolex, to me, is a great example of a company that engages in real differentiation. The company incurs significant costs in building in features, and then you, the customer, are willing to pay a premium for it. The other perceived differentiation is essentially created. It's created through promotion and packaging and stuff like that. I have several good examples, but I'm going to stick with the auto industry for just a moment, and I've got to get rid of the sports space because the camera has a relatively narrow field of view. And I'm not upset about that, but I have to clear the whiteboard. So now, you and I are talking about perceived differentiation. Companies create the perception that their products are special. So here are some useful data. I got these data just a couple of weeks ago as I was preparing these lecture notes. A Toyota Camry, most of us would regard as a fine sort of base level sedan. It's excellent transportation. The base price on a Toyota Camry, this is off the Toyota website, the base price is $23,000. Yes, you can option it up. You can get a V6, you can do other options, but the base price for a Camry is $23,000. Excellent basic transportation. Alternatively, the Lexus, I can't remember if it's an ES or an EC350. This is an entry-level luxury sedan from Lexus, and the base price is $38,000. And you can spend stupid money on it. You can add about plus $7,000 to make it a hybrid and do other things as well. But here's the deal. The Camry, all of us would probably regard to be excellent basic transportation. Most people would regard the Lexus ES350 to be an entry-level luxury car. Do you see that there's a $15,000 difference in price? There is. It's the same damn car. The Lexus is a Toyota wearing a tuxedo. They put in prettier fabric and different headlights and different badges. It's the same platform, the same drivetrain. Now, this is not meant to be a harsh criticism of Toyota. Almost everybody in the industry does it. Y'all, for 35 years, the Pontiac Firebird and the Chevy Camaro were the same car, different badges. My wife has owned 2 Lincoln MKXs. They are mid-size crossovers, excellent vehicle. We've been delighted with them. The day we bought the first one, and for the, whatever it's been, 14, 15 years that she said the 2 of them, we know that it's a Ford Edge all dressed up. It's the same platform, the same drivetrain, the same body, just different badges, and a few nice features. Elaine really valued the interior of the first car and things like that. Plus, there's a different ownership experience with a Lincoln than there is with a Ford, because Ford regards a Lincoln as a luxury brand and it treats its customers that way. So my point is that this is not a criticism of Toyota, although we can pick on them if you want. Let me see a show of hands. Who wants to pick on Toyota? 47, 53 of you. That's a big group. This is called badge engineering. This has been going on in the auto industry for 60 years. But my point is that companies create the perception that something is a luxury good by promotion, by packaging. Blue jeans. Blue jeans. To me, blue jeans represent workwear. I go to Tractor Supply, I give them 28 bucks, I get a good pair of blue jeans. Now, can you spend $60 on a pair of blue jeans and they'll say mud or whatever they're going to say in your butt? I understand that there are blue jeans that women wear, and I'm going to screw this up. Apple butter, something like that. It's a line of blue jeans for ladies, and they start at $150. They start at $150. Y'all, denim is denim. It is brushed cotton. It's all the same. Cigarettes. A pack of Marlboros is $5. A pack of generics is $1.10. Tobacco is tobacco. So many companies create the perception that their products are valuable. Whether it's the auto industry, whether it's the tobacco industry, whether it's the fashion industry, many companies create the perception that what they're selling is all that in a bag of Doritos. And you buy a Lexus, you're getting a Toyota wearing a tuxedo, and that's okay. That's okay. So I just want you to understand before I moved into this building a matrix that differentiation comes in 2 forms. It can either be real. Companies incur significant cost to build in features, or it can be perceived. Companies create the perception that their stuff is special. So let me move now to this comparison, the reason that I tell you that there are only 2 strategies, not 4, like the authors suggest. I'm sure they're nice people. I'm sure. So I'm going to develop a 2x2 matrix, 2 rows, 2 columns. And column 1 will be companies following the cost leadership strategy. Column 2 would be companies who follow a differentiated strategy. Now, here's why I tell you that there are only 2 business level strategies. What the authors present to you as 4 strategies is just a matter of scope. What is the breadth of your market? Is it broad or is it narrow? These aren't different strategies. It's a matter of what size market do you serve? Let's pretend that we're looking at Ferrari. Would you say Ferrari competes on cost, or does it differentiate? I'm pretty sure most of us would agree that it follows a differentiation strategy. Does Ferrari have a broad scope in its market? Does it have a car for every garage? It does not. It only manufactures about 6,000 or 7,000 cars a year worldwide. And the US gets about 2,500, and United Arab Emirates gets a few, and then New Jersey gets a couple. So I would say that on this 2x2 matrix, which has 4 cells, that you and I would put Ferrari down here. We would say the company follows a differentiation strategy, and the scope of its market is narrow. Let's flip that. I think it's fair to say, I hadn't planned on this, but this would be a good comparison. I think it's fair to say, factually, excuse me, that Toyota competes on cost. They do an excellent job of lean manufacturing, and historically they've competed on cost. And they try to sell a car for everybody. They have pickup trucks and crossovers and sedans. And now that they have the Supra back out, they have a performance car. So I think it's fair to say that Toyota competes on cost, and it serves a broad market. So the point is, when the authors talk about 4 strategies, turns out they're dead wrong. There are 2 business level strategies: overall cost leadership and differentiation. The companies who adopt them, though, can choose to serve a broad market like Toyota, or a narrow market like Ferrari, or my Gulfstream G650. All of the faculty have $65 million business jets. We do, all of us, stinking rich. So, this 2x2 matrix was meant to bring this conversation to life. There are only 2 business level strategies: cost leadership and differentiation. This thing about scope, or some people call it focus, it simply speaks to the breadth of the market that you serve. Is it a narrow market that you serve? Is it a wide market that you serve? So, in terms of today, we're finally done. I'm worn out. I'm going to go get all liquored up. No, I'm not. I get so stupid so fast, but so do you. You just like it. I don't. So, we're done. The attendance verification question is, what, loved ones, is the first rule of a gunfight? We're done. Love you. Talk to y'all soon.